Hi, and welcome to another version of Around the Campfire at More Than Warriors. So today, really pleased to be able to catch up with a friend of mine, Nik Samuelson. I've known Nik for a couple of years now. Really admired his story and his journey through life. He started off as a keyboard player back in the wild 80s and 90s.
No, 80s, you were right.
and survived. And then went on to moved into business consulting and started a business which ended up being one of Australia's leading consulting firms, PM Partners, which he sold about a year ago. And now spends his time investing and advising others how to build and grow their businesses. So really happy to have Nik join us today. And, just a reminder, and Nik, just for your context around this, it's, we call this Around the Campfire. So it's really about sharing your story, going into as much or as little depth in that as you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to be pressuring you. But I think there's a lot of value for other men to hear men's stories. And, that's something that men have done over thousands of years around a campfire. And, we're hoping to create a similar space where people can just share their stories without judgment and hopefully pass on some wisdom. So I thank you for joining us today. So I guess to start off with, if you could just give us a little bit about how your journey went from keyboard player to business consultant to where you are now, that'd be awesome, just to kind of fill out a bit of a picture for everyone.
So I think looking back, I think the band was actually my first business. I didn't know it at the time, but I joined four older guys who, when I say older, I was 17 and they were in their early 20s.
So really old.
Yeah, really old. At the time, that gap seemed very old. Now it doesn't. So I joined that band and wanted to make it better, being the 17-year-old know-it-all and them being far better musicians than I was. But I knew how to take the money that we were earning, give them a little bit of it, keep most of it to, reinvest back in the business with better musical instruments or paying roadies to make us look more professional or whatever it was. Right. And I remember doing it in a ledger book, not on a computer, and everything was manual. And they would complain when, they'd effectively earned 500 and I was giving them a $100 note rather than the 500 that they'd earned. So I think that was my first business. And it sort of taught me, maybe a little bit before that, was I worked for a auto electrician. And I remember the first time he paid me, and I was traveling home at the back of the bus with a $50 note in my pocket, and I honestly thought I was the richest man on earth. And that's sort of that. I don't think it's an unhealthy attraction to that money, to money, but the desire to build a business and make money has been there from a very, very young age.
So I mean, what I'm hearing there is, you had an early understanding of the value and how to use money.
Realize, and I think that principle, I mean, you work all the way through to today. One of the biggest challenges of COVID is not a lot of businesses hold a war chest. Yeah. And I think those early days of business was, saving for the rainy day, making sure you got some money in the bank just in case.
Yeah. So then it's, because in my mind, it was a bit of a stretch to move. And, this is might sound a bit strange coming from a dancer who moved into psychotherapy, but now it's less of a stretch when I see you move from a member of a band to a business consultant. So it's more of a natural step then, I guess.
I think, and there's a technical term, what I realized very early on in the band days, as much as I loved it, and loved getting up on stage, and I wanted to be a rock star. But when you realise you're shit at playing keyboards, whilst you might enjoy it, you're not very good at it. I realised I probably needed to go and get a real job.
Right.
And I was working with somebody else. He had the courage to continue to push the idea of us starting our own business.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have done it without him, because I didn't have the courage to do it at the time. We left that business and started our own. That required us both to move he moved from Darwin, I moved from Perth over to Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
My first gig was travelling back and forward to Melbourne every week. So I felt like I was a real businessman on an aeroplane every week. And that was good for the first 4 weeks. And then the next 48 was very painful. But,
Yeah.
Again, the same principle. We earned we earned that, effectively, that 300K each a year, but we put most of it in the bank so that we could employ employee number one. And our rule for employing people was we had to have enough money in the bank to pay them for a year, because we didn't want to jeopardize their own personal careers or their own financial situation. So once we had enough money to pay for our first employee for a year, we brought him on. And it then, once we realized that when you have other people working with you, the incremental value of that, both financially and ability to deliver well, was incredible. And we just, we grew that from, one employee to, I can't remember how many, but it would have been about 20 or 30 quite quickly.
Right. And I guess the business that you created, it lasted, you were involved with it for about 20 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that, we grew it. I bought my business partner out. I was on my own for four years, and that was extremely challenging. The person that I am, I need a sounding board. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, staff weren't able to give me the complete sounding board.
Yeah.
It was what it was. And so for 4 years, I was quite a lonely CEO.
Right.
And I spent those 4 years pestering and badgering what would become my two business partners for the next 12 years, Pete and Steve. Eventually, they tell a different story, but this is my story. Eventually, I wore them down, and we agreed to go into business together. And honestly, to be in business with two very, very good friends, and collectively work stuff out over 12 years to build what effectively became a $100 million revenue business, was the most exciting, the most challenging time of my life.
Mm. So I think, one of the questions I have in my mind I guess my vision is the three of you out there creating this, electric energy, building this business. And it ties in well with that whole warrior energy. So, how did three warriors then sit down at a table and work out what was best for the business, and how did you manage those relationships amongst yourselves?
Yeah, so it started off by us falling over each other. I think you refer to the warriors. All three of us were warriors coming together. Yeah. We would typically have fought each other.
Yeah.
And some of that continued on for a good year, as Pete would step into my space, or I'd step into Steve's space, or we'd just be treading on each other's toes. And yeah. We were very lucky that we had a natural leader, and that was Pete. It's funny, whilst I had the title of CEO and I ran the company, Pete led the three owners. Right. And Pete's super intuitive, leads with empathy, very good listener and very patient person, and he was able to identify when there are any challenges amongst the three of us, bring us together in a room, help us all get on the same page. And whilst we often had robust discussions, didn't necessarily agree with each other, but in principle, we always walked out the door agreeing that what was right for the business, and how we were going to move forward.
Right. So it sounds like, there was a real awareness amongst the three of you as a collective when there needed to be things spoken about and sorted out. And I guess you made that conscious as opposed to letting the subconscious play out, which would have been, we're three warriors and we're going to fight till the death.
Yep. And we did fight. It never got physical. Unless we'd had a few beers, and then it was always fun anyway. but you know what? It was. If I look back, it was incredible how lucky we were as three strong-willed guys. How lucky we were to spend 12 years together and never really fight. It often happens. Ego is a terrible thing when it's not controlled, and it can mean the difference between a successful relationship and an unsuccessful relationship. And we were very lucky to spend 12 years together and just make it work.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm curious, one of the things that comes to my mind is, because it sounds like there was a degree of self-awareness there as individuals and as a collective. And I'm curious about your journey when it comes to being self-aware. So what impact do you think that's had on your business life and your personal life? And I guess, how has that grown over time, your level of self-awareness? Because, if I think about my journey, when I was 24, 27, it was everyone else in the world was the problem, and I was the one who was always right. And I guess if I look back from there to now, what's changed is my level of self-awareness. So my ability to look at and observe myself and the way I show up. So curious about your journey in how that's changed, and the impact that you've noticed on your business life and personal life, for that matter.
Yep. So I was lucky enough to have two real mentors in my life. The first one, who still is my mentor, John Parker, ran big mining companies, turned them around, super successful. And the second one was Pete, my business partner. So John, I could tap into, once a week or once a month, and Pete was there every day. So I need a sort of, my own self-awareness knew that I needed someone, I don't know whether the right word is someone to report to, but someone to be accountable to. Yep. So when I had no one, I asked John to step in and be my mentor. And when I had Pete, or when I was in business with Pete, I had Pete to be accountable to. So that first piece of self-awareness was knowing that if I didn't have someone to be accountable to, I would sort of flounder and make up all my own stories as to why I agreed to do this with myself. Whereas having someone who held you accountable, who simply said, well, Nick, last week we were talking about this week we're talking about this, which one is it? Doesn't matter. But so first...
Sorry, just the question, was it a particular something that happened, or was it something that grew on you, that feeling that, okay, I need to find myself a mentor or someone that, can, I guess, essentially spot my blind spots for me and support me around them?
So I love to learn. I mean, even now I'm 54, I've grown and run a successful business, but every day I look to find somebody else to learn from. And I knew I didn't know a lot about business. And very quickly, there's a little tale, not a tale. When John Parker first started in my business as the chairman, he said, Nick, if you want me to be chairman, I want you to write me a board report every month. So my first board report I wrote to him, and it was probably one of the best things I've ever done. You know, explaining to John how the business was performing. It came back some days later after I'd sent it, with red pen all over it. And what do you mean by this? And I don't understand this. And I said to John, I rang him up and I said, John, I appreciate your feedback, but I'm trying to run a freaking business here. I don't have time to write these things over and over again. And his response, not word for word, was, Nick, if you want me to be chairman, then I need to have a board report that I understand. So he did this month on month, and it was super frustrating. But I persisted with it because I needed John there as a sounding board. And some years later, I got a gig where I had to advise a CEO of a business, and I'd write him a report every month, and he'd just read it and send me back a response to say, Nick, thanks, this is really well summarised. And he paid me a lot of money to do that. And remember the first time that the check came through from this business, I rang John and I said, I get it, John. So the lesson there for me was, I didn't always know when I was learning, but I knew when I'd learnt,
yeah.
and who had taught me. And yeah.
So I guess what you're describing is what I'm hearing is a real curiosity, remaining curious about things, and I guess wanting to learn new things about yourself, about how how you can improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of came in selling the business. Maybe we'll get into this a little bit later. In selling the business, I think a true awareness came around identity. I don't know whether you want to get into that now. Or
absolutely, because I mean, I think, and this is one of the questions that I have, and more broadly, you know, as men, if you like, is, and this may be something that you're going to touch on with this or not, but, you know, I think for a lot of us, our identity sits within what we do. And we've spent a lot of time building that identity. And you know, that may or may not be true. And I'm curious about, you know, when you did choose to sell your business, how did that shape your identity or change it, or?
So we for many years, probably the last 5 years, we were on a course to sell the business. It was beautifully planned out. The exit was, you know, to sell a business and exit on the same day as you sell it was a great place to be. And everything that I personally had planned for 20 years, and Steve and myself had planned for the last 12. And interestingly, I'd stood down a year or two before we sold as the CEO. So that was sort of step number one. I had separated and divorced my wife in a very amicable way, but that was now an end of a relationship. So no longer a CEO, no longer a husband. The family was somewhat disconnected, although we both work really hard every day to make sure it remains connected. But two of my sons moved to Perth, and I stayed here in Sydney with my third son. So as a father, it had changed. As a husband, sorry, I just lost you. I don't know why that's doing that. As a CEO, it had changed. And now I'd just gone and sold my business. So as a business owner, I'd changed. So imagine, I mean, any one of those is quite significant. Changing pretty much everything about yourself, or where you got where your identity sat. I was completely lost. And, you know, I'm pretty strong-willed, but whilst not many people knew, there were a few, including yourself, Andrew, could see and knew that I wasn't completely broken, but all the everything I'd identified with for 20 years was gone. And so I spent the next few years, and it's only sort of, what are we, about 2 years out of, no, a year and a half out of selling the business. It's only maybe, it took a year to really come to terms with losing every one of those identities, all by choice, over the period of 1 or 2 years, and super challenging to have to re-identify with something else or someone else.
Yeah. I think it's really powerful and important for us as men to share our journeys through those moments, because I don't think you're alone in that, and I think it can be of great service to others to hear. Sure, everything kind of fell apart,
Yep.
if you like, and again, you chose that. However, there is a way to kind of come out of that, and my sense of you now is that you've managed to pull together a whole range of different pieces, but still maintain, fundamentally who you are, but with different pieces to it.
Yep.
So although it feels like everything is gone and changed, I guess there's a core you that has remained through that.
Yeah, I think remained through it and actually became better, Andrew. More self-awareness. I arrive at everything now giving, not trying to take first, and it just feels, it's just such a much more relaxed place. And I think what you're doing here and what you're setting up is instrumental for men. And I've been extremely lucky for the last 20 years to meet every month with a group of 7 other guys who, through the Entrepreneurs Organization, which you and I have both done a lot of stuff with. And I think without that, I'd probably be a little more broken than I am today, in that those guys, we meet every month. We meet for 3 or 4 hours. It started off 20 years ago as all the warriors arriving in a room, and we would talk about revenue and profit, and we'd beat our chests, and if someone said they were 6, everyone else would be 7. And, my dog was blacker than your dog, and all that. And that went on for a good 2 or 3 months.
Right.
And then one of the guys who joined us was a psychologist, and he would often call out the bullshit.
Right.
And he'd spend time with each of us and say, "What do you really mean by that?" Yeah. And or what do you really want to talk about, or what's really important? So you take it from the brave warriors down to a level where we'd open up a bit. Yeah. And to this day now, I mean, we've cried together, we've laughed together, whilst it's still really hard as a man to sit in front of other men and cry, it's so liberating to know that I know if I'm ever stuck anywhere with anything, I can WhatsApp these guys, and within a minute or an hour or a day, I can have a conversation, or we can be meeting to help me work through my challenge. And women do it beautifully, quite naturally, and men don't. But when it does happen, when men do get together and share with a level of depth and empathy, it is a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah. And, that's really what we are trying to create here, is a space, and, the image that I keep having in my mind is a place, a bunch of men gathering, and where they can put down their spears and their shields, and breathe, go, oh, okay, now, this is really bothering me, or, and it's not always about what's going wrong. It's about sharing the joys. But I think,
Yep.
it's just as important for us to be able to talk about what we're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And as a segue into that, one of the things that I always say to anyone who's interested or asks is the question of parenting. I have 2 boys, beautiful boys, but that is something that I've struggled with. I would say parenting is by far the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yep.
I'll go to work. That's easy.
Yep.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit about your journey as a parent, because I know you have 3 amazing boys. And how's your journey around parenting and over the time? Because I guess like anything, it grows.
Yeah, it's like you say, business is so much easier than parenting. You can ask a staff member nicely to do something and they'll do it. You can ask a child nicely to do something 20 times and they'll still avoid it. But I suppose, yeah, we've had the challenge I've had the challenge of parenting from a distance. So 2 of them, they now have a new stepdad who's doing as good a job as he can with stepchildren. That's another challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Is that their mum did a phenomenal job throughout the first sort of the 20 years of from our first child. She was phenomenal as a mother and allowed me to be a businessman. And I think looking back, and we hear this time and time again, looking back, I didn't spend enough time with them. I gave them stuff, or we gave them a lot of stuff and a lot of experiences.
Right.
But what they really wanted was time and love, and not the time and love that in the way that we wanted. It wasn't come and you do the whippersnippering and I'll do I'll sit on the lawnmower and mow the lawn. That's not spending time together. It's Dad, sit down with me and shape this stick, or let's kick the footy for an hour, or sort of on their terms, not on your terms or on my terms. And I think that's the lesson I've learned is, now I try and, Cass will come to me and say, "Hey Dad, can we go out and kick the footy?" This whole 54-year-old body struggles to kick the footy. But, I'll go out there and suffer for the next few days. But, what he gets and what I get when I actually do, the going to do it is still quite painful. The coming back from having done it is so rewarding. We chat. We don't even, it does not even have to be a conversation. It's simply a connection. That kicking of the football is sharing energy back and forward, and often we don't say much, but we discuss a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? I know from my own perspective and learning as a father, my father, his I guess message to me was, to provide materially for a family, which I feel like I've been able to do sometimes really well and other times not so well. However, what I'm hearing from you is it's that shift from that, let's focus on what I can give you, the experiences that I can give you, versus me just showing up and being present.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it's quite interesting. So Cass is my eldest at nearly 22. Finn is my second eldest at 17, and Finn lives with his mum over in Perth. And Finn and I, they say you shouldn't have a favourite, but I tell Finn and I tell the others that he's my favourite.
I'm glad you're open about that.
But part of it's just so I can shit stir them like they do with me every day. But it's quite interesting. his ability to connect. You know, he simply brings up on FaceTime pretty much every day. He's got nothing to say. He just wants to ring up and, hi Dad, you know, what are you up to? And his style of connecting is very similar to mine, so it works. So he's not really my favourite. We just connect in the same way.
Yeah.
And then you've got my eldest in Cassidy. He's really tested my thinking. So, like my dad said, you know, grow up and like Dad said, grow up and, you know, support the family and, you know, get a job and earn some money. And now I took it further that, you know, Dad had a job, I have a business.
Yeah.
My explanation to Cass is, you know, you should do this and this is what it looks like, and why don't you have a job? And he's quite an intelligent Gemini, so he's good half the time. I just got to work out which Gemini I'm dealing with, but he tests the whole philosophy of, you know, he has a massive goal that he wants to achieve. It doesn't make sense to me. He knows all the steps that he needs to take. He's got some challenges of taking those steps, but you know, he's testing all of my thought patterns and my learned behaviours. And I think that the change for me was when I stopped trying to combat him and started trying to understand why he thinks that way.
Yeah.
I've learned probably more in the year from when I changed my viewpoint. I've learned more in a year about his. They're not called, are they the Gen Ys or not millennials, but whatever the next generation is. I've learned more from them, and Simon Sinek touches on it really well. He says those organisations that can adjust to this group's way of thinking will be successful.
Right.
And if you can't adjust, you know, they think differently, they work differently, everything's different about them, but they're the next generation of workforce. So get ready.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that's really beautifully articulated, you know, as men, you know, really being aware enough to not try to, or try not to, in other words, you know, project our story and our life onto our kids, which is, you know, I guess liberating but tricky at the same time.
Yeah. Frustrating, challenging. You know, we only know what we know.
Yeah.
And I love to share from a perspective of experience as opposed to opinion.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm challenged with it every day. You know, why, just because you did it that way, why does it mean we have to do it that way?
Absolutely. and it's that real ability to let go and, you know, be supportive of them, rather than you should do this.
And then just love them for who they are and the little things they achieve every day. You know, and it's funny at times how hard it is just to wrap your arms around them and tell them you love them. And it's such a simple thing to do, and yet so hard at times.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's all we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If that happened, you know, imagine if we were able to do that with our kids and with our partners and receive the same thing, the world would probably be a different place.
Yeah.
And I guess just lastly, I wanted to touch on, you know, we've spoken about your journey as a business owner, you know, a man seeking mentoring, as a father. How about, you know, in your personal relationships, what difference have you noticed as you've gone through your life as to how you show up in those more intimate relationships?
So I've had in 24 years, I've had 2 relationships, 22 with my wife and 2 with my new partner. I mentioned before, you know, we were busy doing business and raising a family with my ex-wife Teddy, and that was great. But what we both realised, or what happened for no one's fault, is, you know, intimacy, and not sex, but true intimacy. You know, where you come together and you share and you hug and you kiss and you know, all the things that, you know, the things that you did in the early days of your relationship, you know, without hesitation, and with with energy and lust, sort of pitted away over time, and everything else became more important. And I think, you know, we grew apart. We had different interests. We still collectively loved the kids, but what we showed them was, what we didn't show them was intimacy.
Right.
And I think, you know, looking back, you know, the massive lesson that I learned is, whilst it's great to look after your kids and provide for them and everything, how you show up every day together as the partnership of parenting, that is, they are far more aware of that than probably you are. You know, they see it every day, and they see you either connecting or not connecting, you know, good or bad. And I think, looking back, not knowing at the time, but now looking back, intimacy was something we didn't show them enough. And the beauty of our respective new relationships is, you know, I don't know whether they see this, the first part of this is good, but they now have 4 parents, right? So you know, the smart in all 3 of them use those 4 parents very, very wisely.
Be able to get what they need.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the beauty is, you know, with Teddy and her new partner or new husband, they see intimacy in them every day.
Right.
With me and my new partner, they see intimacy in us every day. You know, we hug, we kiss, we're always connected. We do things together. You know, they watch at a distance and say, oh, you know, you guys are always hugging and kissing, but you know what? It's actually what they've missed. So, you know, whilst we might not have got it right at the beginning, we're getting it right now. And, you know, they're seeing what love is all about, and hopefully learning and bringing that into their relationships.
And I think, you know, ultimately, again, what you're talking about is our ability to be present with each other and truly connect. You know, at that deeper level of what we need is to be seen, heard, felt, and loved as humans. You know, just to finish off then, Nick, I just had, you know, a question. If you were to look back at that, you know, that boy who was sitting on the bus with $50 in his pocket, going, "Whoa, I've just, you know, won the lottery." What would you, with the wisdom that you have now, what would you, you know, advise him, given your experience?
So that's a great question. My advice to the young Nick would be, it's okay to be driven and to seek out success, but success, the biggest component of success is the relationships you create and the friendships you build and the connections you have along the way. And you know, I've been super successful in business, and I'm super proud of everything I've done, but I've got to a point where everything I want materially I can have. And the number one thing that I get the very most from is connecting with people. So, you know, it doesn't matter what car you drive or what house you live in, or, you know, I thrive every day on, and COVID's a massive challenge for me, as it is for you too, I know, Andrew, is, you know, I live with my 21-year-old son and my 20-year-old niece, and they're great to connect with, but I thrive to get out and just, I'm sitting here at work club today, and I've just connected with the club manager here and some of the concierge staff, and it's just, the people you meet along the way, and the energy you give and get from them are actually the most important.
Yeah. So if I was to summarize, be courageous in your business, seeking, go out into the world and be a warrior, but I guess equally be courageous in connecting and relating with others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a massive and powerful message to finish on. It's that whole thing of courage, to show up and be who we are and choose to connect. And choose to connect deeply.
Yeah, the deeply bit is we all connect. How you going? Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But connecting at a level of depth with, where we really understand how someone is going, because we all say we're good first.
Sure.
But the next three questions really determine how I'm going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Nik. One, for the connection that I have with you, because that's something that I value.
Same.
And secondly, for taking the time out. I know you're pretty busy, but to take the time out and share some of your insights and your story with us today, I really value that. So thank you so much. And I do look forward to catching up with you in person when we can fly and do all those things again. Yeah.
I look forward to the hug, mate. There's not very many men that I hug, but and there's not very men that I physically have to look up to, but I enjoy both of them with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nik. Thanks.
Cheers, Andrew.